We are live here to talk about some finales. The Flash finale, the Superman and Lois finale. If I'm being honest, there's like 4 other finales that I've watched this week because were like within the last 2 weeks because I was like marathoning a bunch of stuff. But I guess somewhat most importantly, the Flash finale is the most recent thing because that just ended 11 minutes ago. Now, I cannot be trusted to talk about the Flash finale by myself, so I gotta bring in some people. Let's bring in Kate and Carey. Now, first of all, let's notice that the layout issues that we've been facing for the last couple shows have been magically fixed, and I would love to take credit for it, but it's actually Stage 10 that fixed it. Kate and Carey, how are you guys?
Doing fantastic.
I'm good.
I love to hear it. So, before we dive into kind of the finales galore that we've been handed this week, are there any notable news items or even semi-notable news items?
Yeah, so we've talked about it a couple of times, but we're getting closer to the date, so I felt like we should mention it again. Persuasion, the adaptation that Netflix has made, comes out on July 15th. There has now been a trailer drop since last time we mentioned it, and there has been some mixed responses to the trailer. People are a little upset because it's a very humorous trailer with some modern language. The modern language will take you out a little bit, but I think it's okay that they're highlighting the comedy. It's the least humorous novel in her repertoire, but it still has its jokes. And from one clip I've seen, that specific clip, if you have had a chance to see it, really will restore any faith, at least to get you back to like, we'll give this the benefit of the doubt. We'll go into this with open arms and hope it's good. And then on the same Jane Austen front, there is a novel by Jill Hornby, I think is how you would say her name, called Miss Austen. I actually own this book. And it is essentially kind of from what I understand, it's a historical fiction-esque retelling of the childhood of Jane Austen and her sister Cassandra.
Ooh.
And PBS Masterpiece is making a 4-part miniseries adaptation of the novel. So just another period drama to add to the stack, and it's once again me and Cammie winning at calling that there would be a resurgence of the period drama genre. So we are living.
Yes. A renaissance, I believe, was the term we used.
Yes.
So really, in other words, I think we predicted the latest Beyonce era as well, if you really think about it. Beyonce may have also some credit in ushering this era, as well as Shonda Rhimes and Bridgerton, just any number of things. But I personally would love to take as much credit as is reasonably possible, which is approximately 0.
I mean, at the very bare minimum, we were really good at reading the writing on the wall, and
yes,
we at least had to take credit for that.
Yes, absolutely. It was not my writing, but I read it. Put that on my tombstone. I don't have a bunch of news to bring to the table. I will just note that this is like a highly transitional summer where, it's weird. It feels like a lot of the, what's the term I'm supposed to use for this? Pandemic-related entertainment disruptions have kind of worked their way through, and we're getting close to a new schedule. But this summer is perhaps one of the last holdovers of schedule overlaps. So we have kind of an odd schedule with the finales that we're going to talk about today being a little later than normal, and some renewals and cancellations came a little off schedule. So there's been a lot of that going on this summer. That's not so much news as it is like announcements being made at an odd time. And same also with certain seasons kind of being released. We've got I'm like one of 2.5 people that watch this. Like Virgin River is coming back at an odd time coming up soon. I think Umbrella Academy, which was just released, kind of came at like a different time than it has before. Stranger Things was split in 2 for the first time, and whatever, just kind of odd release patterns that aren't so much news, but we'll put them in that category. But it's not news, but we really should just like start us all off with it. Raise your hand if you just watched the Flash finale.
Bits and pieces.
Bits of, you know what? I'll take bits and pieces. That's better than, okay. So I'm going to do a little rotatey then. Kate loves herself, and for that, she gets relegated to the bottom. Can I just start off with a complaint? Because who am I if not a complainer? And then we'll get into our ratings. If my ship, if one half of my ship died, if Felicity or Donna or any of like my big main whatever ships died, and at any part in the following 10 minutes of them being reunited, they fist bumped, somebody would be fighting me in real life. Somebody would be dropping a pin and fighting. I want to understand why that choice was made. Help me understand. I'm not rooting for Barry's happiness at any point at any time, but how did he not get to kiss the person we're told he loves more than life itself when she was brought back from the dead?
See, before I answer that question, I need to ask this.
Okay.
Because I didn't see how she got resurrected or what. So
sure.
How did that happen?
I wish I could tell you. I really do. So she ends up in a time stone, and Damien Dark is there in said time stone. Damien Dark is like dead / in another universe / whatever. And he tells her that, you know, she and Barry have a connection and they don't feel it. So Barry believes that she's dead and she doesn't feel her connection to Barry. So I don't know if she believes she's dead, or I don't know what's going on. It's very unclear, and it's very focused on Barry's perspective, which is like always my issue. They don't actually get into what Iris feels, but what's new. And Damien Dark tells her she just needs to like reignite the fire, reignite the flame between them, and she won't be dead anymore, which is like bizarrely on the nose for what's actually going on for this show, but that bit of meta is neither here nor there. So she reignites the spark and turns up back at her dad's house, where Barry is not there, reunites with literally everybody except Barry first, and all of them have more appropriate reactions to her being back. Then she goes to stop Barry from fighting, and he gets into like lotus leaf Zen pose and tries to fight the bad guy that way. And even after then, like when they're like back at the house and like everything's like fine and healed, whatever, like there's just no like, oh my God, I love you so much, I'm so glad you're alive, like any of that like sickly sweet stuff, which I'd complain about as well. But like, what are we working with here? This is your paragon of love. And then did you see the scene at the end where they're like supposed to be cuddling on the couch and they're like, no matter what comes next, we can take it. And I'm like, I've literally never felt less sexual tension in my entire life. And again, it shouldn't be all about the ship. That's just the one complaint I wanted to jump on right from the start, because I'm nothing if not a broken record. And this is, again, supposed to be our paragon of love. So let's rate tonight's finale on a scale from 1 to 5. What would you give it?
Based on what I saw, how it wrapped up, and more importantly, what sort of portends for the future, I thought it was about a 3.5, to be honest.
Okay. I think that's pretty decent, and I'm not going to disagree with you on that. I think it's right around a 3.5. There were some moments I really enjoyed, and I'll give you a high point that used to be a low point for me. I used to kind of be picking, so I happen to really enjoy Cecile. I think that the actress is really good. I think the character is really fun. And I like that Cecile comes in as kind of like an older character, you know, like I think ultimately she's still pretty young in the grand scheme of things, but she's older and she's married to Joe, whatever. And yet she still has powers and she still gets to be kind of like this really interesting personality. But the bone I had to pick that I've seen come up so much online is, what are actually Cecile's powers? It seems like it changes all the time. And in this finale, it really seemed like rather than answering that, they kind of poked fun at the fact that we don't know. They kind of poked fun at the fact that it's constantly changing. It was very self-aware. It gave me Riverdale vibes. And that, in combination with the fact that I already like Cecile, really kind of bumped it up a notch for me, where I'm like, okay, they've been relying more on her as a character lately, and if this is the direction they're choosing to go, where it's sort of this absurdist super heroine type of thing, I'm perfectly fine with it.
It's interesting because her initial power seemed to sort of be, I don't know if it was empathy, but she could sort of like feel what other people felt.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you take that and say she has the ability to sort of glom on to something, right? Whether it's people's thoughts or feelings or emotions, I don't know that it's that big of a leap to say that if it's a glomming type power, that she could take someone's meta power, glom onto that, and use it somehow, right? So I'm just assuming that's what they were doing in the writer's room. But to be honest, her powers and to a great degree, Allegra's powers were sort of very nebulous to a degree. So the fact that
Allegra's
they're leaning
powers are
into this
pretty
stuff,
nebulous as well, and they kind of address that in her episode as well, where it's sort of like hand wavy, anything that kind of has to do with light. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, if we're not defining it any more than that, that's perfectly fine. Again, I like Allegra. I'm an apologist when it comes to superheroines anyways, so even if it's somewhat ridiculous, like, I'm here, I'm listening. I'll tell you another bit that I really liked, and I'll credit, like, I credit the Cecile bit for like a full point that I gave it. I'll credit this other bit for a full point that I gave it. The ending where we see them tease bringing Frost back, and it's, I would say, made abundantly clear that at that point she's sort of a villain, and perhaps not really her, and they don't show her, and you just hear her voice. I actually really liked that. And I was an advocate for Frost staying an anti-heroine, and I love an anti-heroine, but I don't think the show can write an anti-heroine, so the next best thing is a villainess. And if their goal is to bring back Frost to be this awful, torturous, villainous, whatever going on next season, with it being the last season of The Flash, I'm fine with it. Like, at this point, great. Have her main goal be kill Bear, like, hell, at least we're probably going to get some sexual tension that way. So sure, go for it. We're grasping at straws. I really enjoyed that.
and they give themselves a break because it allows them sort of like all off season to figure out what that's going to be, what it's going to look like, as opposed to saying, "Bam, here it is," and then hang yourself into a corner, right?
Right. Absolutely.
So, and I'll tell you a little secret.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I probably, like I said, only saw about 10 minutes of The Flash, give or take.
Yeah.
I'm probably more excited about The Flash next year than Superman and Lois.
I'm excited to see Flash come back as like a non-human villain. Throughout, or not Flash, Frost. Throughout Frost being present, there's always been a lot of humanity to her. In fact, I would say she's almost always the voice of reason and has had actually a good moral code underneath the snark. So seeing like a true full villainess will be fun. And then, all of the like Pollyanna fans who want like Barry and the West family to be good and perfect and up on a pedestal and the bad guys to be bad guys will like get what they want. Whatever. Cool. Superman and Lois. Are we cool if we just kind of like jump right over to that? Because there's literally nothing else I want to bring up from tonight's Flash finale. Joe West did a good job. That's my last note. He was the only one that had an appropriate reaction to Iris coming back. Even Damien Dark was pretty flat, and I actually kind of unpopularly like him as a villain. But Superman and Lois.
Before we go,
oh yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask this?
Sure.
Because they were making this big deal about this cameo in The Flash. Was Damien Dark the cameo? Was that it?
I think that was who they were. I assume that's who they were talking about. Maybe that's very Arrow fan centric of me. They wouldn't have been talking about what's the older grown up Flash. Are they calling him Jay Garrick still?
Yeah, but what's her name? The actress that plays the Lucille, like, hyped this cameo up so much, and I'm like, that's it.
I mean, I feel like Damien Dark has popped up like almost almost as many times as John Tickle has.
To be fair, they did say it was somebody that we've already seen,
Yeah.
so just
I,
let it be.
I
Right.
will say, okay, Damien Dark, when he was on Arrow, he did a really good job being kind of like this intimidating presence from a mind perspective, so kind of like a mind villain. And once we had a few episodes of him, that trick kind of played itself out and it kind of fell flat. But in the beginning, Damien Dark was kind of cool, especially since he was originally introduced as a villain for Felicity. So bringing him in for something like this, where his scenes are exclusively with Iris, and I am perhaps, I don't know how many people remember this, but like, guys, Iris is supposed to be smart. She's supposed to have like her doctorate. You know, they don't talk about it, but you know, the North remembers. I appreciated that like they gave what is supposedly on paper like 8 years ago a smart girl, like a smart villain, like that's kind of cool. And I thought they'd have kind of this cool like Sherlockian mind game, mind palace type of whatever face off for her to like get out or whatever. They didn't really give us that, but like pairing him up with Iris as like I guess they weren't adversaries necessarily, but scene partners was smart. In practice, it didn't really give me everything I wanted it to give. And I kind of got the feeling that a lot of the scenes were cut because there were kind of odd cuts between their scenes. When you watch the whole episode, you'll see there's parts where it feels like you're jumping in the middle and there wasn't an intro and there was maybe supposed to, whatever. But the thought process behind it, I think, wasn't bad in terms of a cameo. But no, it was not a cameo worth hyping up. Damien Dark showed up everywhere at this point. Soups and Low. Who's watched the Superman and Lois bit? I got a no, and I got what appears to be a half again.
I watched it all.
You watched it? Okay, that was not a half. It cut it off. Okay, we'll start with ratings before I just obnoxiously give my opinion off the bat. What did you think of the Superman and Lois finale?
I was disappointed.
Kate, are you okay with spoilers?
Go ahead and spoil it. I've been disappointed this whole season. So I've been trying to nicely say it, but I just not loved it.
There were I would say there's some interesting moments that didn't pan out. There was one part I liked, which was, spoiler, Lana turning down Kyle. A big win. I know that was temporary, but let me have my moment. Sorry, go ahead.
There were a number of things I liked about the episode, but the things I didn't like were just really, really took it down.
Yeah. So let's talk about what we liked. There were some good, it was brief. This was another piece where I felt like it was heavily trimmed. And the reason I noticed that is because I was interested in these scenes, but the scenes with Natalie and John and that kind of family bit, super, super brief, consistently brief, but interesting, that storyline. There was a bit of a rushed storyline, I would say, going on with portraying Lana as mayor, but I'm happy that we are seeing her act as a mayor now. Tell me what your favorite moments were. What are the moments that you did not hate?
The moments that I didn't hate, actually, I liked a lot. I liked Lois and Chrissy.
Yes.
I liked that.
The reveal.
Yes. I liked aspects of the action sequence between Superman and Allie, even though it was sort of hard to understand on first viewing, like what was actually happening. Second viewing, I took it in better. It looked good enough. So those are the two things that I really liked about the episode.
Can I tell you something that I like? I disliked it, question mark, but I kind of admired the kind of cheesy attempt. You could probably tell from what I'm saying what it is I'm about to reference. And I'm going to spell it out for Kate. So there's a moment, my cat is jumping on scaffolding next to me as if he literally just jumped like 5 feet up in the air. I don't know what is going on with this animal. So there was a moment, and I'm trying to remember exactly where it fell in the sequence of the episode, where they have like Lana and Lois are not like in the same place, but like Superman is off like fighting or whatever, and they have Lois being like, Clark, something like that. And then like 2 seconds later, it cuts to Lana and she's like, Superman. I'm sure this is my Lana voice. Superman. Like, and they're like, obviously, Kate's literally face palming. And they're like, obviously trying to
I know where this is going.
And they're obviously trying to contrast it. And I'm like, are they trying to set this up for like, one of them is in love with Clark and one of them's in love with Superman? Like, I literally can't figure out what dynamic they're going for here. I mean, but like, they tried something. They tried something there.
Yeah, that's always been a bit of an underlying implication in both just like historic Superman lore, but also just especially this show. And it's always been like, why? Why does it have to be a thing?
See, I didn't take it that way.
How did you take it?
I took it as a sort of a parallel, and we were like on like two different Earths and sort of like flickering back and forth. And I just thought it was a parallel, and certainly to use those two characters was an interesting choice because people were going to draw those conclusions. But I just thought it was a good parallel to see because who else was going to do that, right?
It was an interesting parallel, and just from like a micro dialogue standpoint, the parallel makes sense. One of them is waiting for Superman, as the title would suggest, and one of them is waiting for Clark. And you know, I get what they were doing there, but as somebody who likes Superman and Lois, this has been an entire season of them contrasting Superman and Lois with Superman and Lana. And Superman and Lois are married. And it's just, I don't know. Am I a prude? I'm a prude. Let me stop. What did you think about the reveal of that, like with the younger, sorry, spoiler, Kate, with the younger boys and Sarah, and now Sarah's in the loop, and what's going on there?
I like how the reveal in real time actually happened. Mm-hmm. I thought that was intense, right? But you know, the aftermath of it is they're both been through their own sorts of personal like hell, right? And I think if any two folks can sort of navigate this, it would be Sarah and Jordan. So I think they'll be fine.
They really brought me around to Sarah and Jordan at the end. You know, I was kind of off them for a bit, and I was like, are they going to switch it to Sarah and John? Well, which one's the curly haired? Curly haired is Jordan.
Jordan has the curly.
I always get that mixed up. I thought they were going to mix it up and go with Sarah and the other brother. I thought they might go mix it up and go with Sarah and Natalie, which I'm still all for. But they really brought me around to the OG ship, as it were, there at the end. Yeah, I like the finale. I like the wrap up of the natural conflict. I really liked what they had for Lois in this. And I know I'm inclined to like what they have for Lois regardless, but her reveal with Chrissy, the limited interactions that she had with her own family as well was really nice. So there was a lot to like in the finale, but it did leave me hoping that next season is different. And the measurable ways that I would want next season different is, with it being season 3, I just would not want it to revolve around a reveal of who's Superman. if they want to deal with like the revealing him to the mass population or something like that at some point, they can, 4 or 5 or later, whatever. But with season 3, I just kind of want to get away from this whole like secrets theme. And I don't know, like I never like a love triangle, but I'm always kind of like morbidly interested in this, like how they're playing things out. But I could do without the hinted at shadow love triangle that they're kind of shadow boxing around right now. I just mixed like 5 metaphors, but y'all know exactly what I mean, especially with that ending, that last scene with Clark and Lana and the I couldn't do this without you. I'm like, I have seen this, bought the t-shirt, I've watched this show, I know exactly how this goes. Y'all better cut this out. Anyways, that's what I want for season 3. What do you want for season 3?
The only thing that I really appreciated that they foreshadowed in season 3 was that John Henry was going to have like a distinct and definitive story to explore. And so it's not a story that revolves around the Kent. So I really like that because I like the actor and I want to see him have more to do. The fortress in the middle of the ocean, I'm assuming anyone would be able to see it and get to it. Like that didn't make any sense at all to me.
It's a new set that's not the middle of the U.S.
Yeah, what I did appreciate about that is the sort of tease that Clark gave to Jonathan about this Kryptonian technology that his mom was talking about. And so that might give him something to do to tie him closer to his Kryptonian heritage. So I'm looking forward to that. I have a question for you. So in the episode, they had Bizarro Lois show up. She said like one line reverse, and then the rest of the episode, she just stood there off in the corner. Why in the hell was she there?
Because Bizarro versions of characters have extra eyeliner on and are somewhat hot in that sense.
And that's fine, but she was just there.
Yeah. I really got the sense throughout a lot of this finale was perhaps shot as almost a 2-hour finale and was cut down to 1 hour. There were a couple moments where I felt like maybe a good portion of a scene was cut out, and then there were just moments where it felt like it jumped from one thing to the next, or just some heavy-handed editing. And I kind of appreciate that, because I wonder, had it been 2 hours, would we be sitting here saying it was slow and there was a bunch of things bogging it down that didn't need to be there? And for like looking at what the actual plot accomplished in the finale, I could see that we don't need 2 hours to get through that plot. But I just got the sense that a lot was edited.
I agree. I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
And it's been exhausting for me to talk about it with people in social media. What have been your thoughts about the fact that Superman and Lois is not on quote unquote our Earth Prime? What are your thoughts about that?
That doesn't bother me, and that is because I come from a decade of trauma, and that trauma is from watching Arrow be on literally everybody's Earth. Just Arrow was literally the street corner. Arrow was open borders. Arrow was you just come and go as you please. Nobody's checking passports. Everybody can spin off a show off of Arrow. And what happens with that is you start giving up your plot time for other things. You start giving up your world constraints to fit somebody else's meta power that doesn't make any sense in your world. I just know all the ways it can break. And I know that comes across as a wet blanket. I know that comes across as old. I know that comes across as like a negative point of view. But the more you can isolate shows, I would cite Black Lightning as an example of that being done well. Black Lightning did a good job of insulating itself. They would go and do crossovers with other shows to extents. They were part of crossovers very, very rarely, but especially at the beginning when they were establishing their world, their reality, and their tone, they didn't sacrifice that by just having every random Flash and Legend and whatever show up on their street. And I found that to be a great success in terms of world building. It really let you get sucked into that world. And it was always much easier for me to suspend disbelief in the Black Lightning world. I think I'm able to suspend disbelief to an extent in the Superman and Lois world because I'm not forced to merge that with other shows, and because I'm not constantly wondering at every mid-season finale if it's actually a backdoor pilot to a spinoff. What do you think?
I from the very beginning, I did not need Superman and Lois to be connected to Earth Prime. They are part of the Arrowverse because there is a multiverse inside Arrowverse, but they don't need to be on Earth Prime, and I am happy that they are not. The best thing that it allows them to do is they can pick and choose sort of the best things of the Arrowverse and bring their own version and spin on it, and not have to deal with the baggage that we've dealt with for like the last 10, 11 years or whatever the case may be from Earth Prime. I think it gives them the best of all of us. But there have been so many people who have been like, I can't believe it. I'm like, why would you want to attach yourself to a dying universe? I mean, there's one show left. What are we doing here?
If they really want to merge it over, they can do some temporary filler episode where there's some temporary merge and they hand wave it or do whatever. But they would have to come up with a good plot-based reason for why that crossover is happening. And I think the limitation that was imposed on Arrow and the Arrowverse was that any crossover could happen and they didn't need a plot-based rationale for doing it. If for some reason they wanted, for example, Naomi, which I think is over now, like I think that didn't get a renewal, but she was always talking about Superman. If at some point, let's pretend those shows extended for a while and Naomi was going to have a crossover with Superman and Lois or vice versa, they would have to give you a plot reason for how and why that could happen. It couldn't just be some random thing that suddenly slows an entire season for 2 or 3 weeks in order to accommodate a crossover that doesn't really make sense. So I think that it becomes more of a boundary than a limitation, or almost a quality control rather than a limitation. You must have this much, quality plot to access our show, one would think. But
and they've done that. I mean, this is the second season, and they've already introduced 2 other Earths, right?
Right.
The Earth that John Henry is from, and Bizarro Earth. So I just think they have the freedom to do what they want, and I'm all for it.
I agree. Well, Kate, I want to bring you up to the top here because I want you to kick off our next little bit wherein I hear about things that are not DCCW. And by that, I mean, what else we watched this week or read or listened to. So I know we don't have a ton of time left, but Kate, you loved yourself and you didn't watch The Flash and Superman and Lois. What did you watch?
Yes. So I today got through the first episode of Only Murders in the Building, and we're kicking off to a rousing start for the second season. All the snarky, snappy lines back. I already have theories brewing, but after only one episode, so I'm sure it's wrong. The only thing I really have to say about what actually happened is I cannot believe they took the jackets out of that bunny's apartment. Do they not think why would you do that?
Have they read any criminal novel or watched any cop TV show ever?
And there was no rationale as to why
they're like, it's cold in this elevator. What?
And they're literally only going to be in the elevator for a few seconds, and then they go outside.
Taking furs worth like $2,000 each, and are probably easily traceable back to Bunny's place.
Yeah, it's very specific. Like, obviously, Bunny's. It's very clear that this is one of the things that they just really needed a stretch reason to fully blame, and they can't just use the painting showing up at Charles. Like, they need to have a whole long laundry list of reasons to implicate them even more than they already are. And I get it, but I saw it happen. I was like, no, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. But other than that, it was a fantastic first episode. I'm really interested in what Cara Delevingne's character is going to be doing.
Same.
Other than just looking amazing and like flirting with Selena's character the whole time.
Such good chemistry,
honestly,
Kate. I literally was dying. She's so good at what she does.
If she's only there to flirt with her, that is perfectly fine. But
yes.
I think it's going to be really great. I love this show simply for the random like cameos that you would never expect. So, like Amy Schumer just popping up and like being the weirdest fangirl
trying to
and
buy the rights
of the story. That was amazing. So I will probably watch the second episode later tonight. But I'm glad that we have it back. It was something I missed. It's that quick humor is great. I also, in the time we've been away, fell through a rabbit hole of obsession, and I can either hold off on the greater discussion or I can talk about it now, but I read The Time Traveler's Wife, and then I watched the entirety of the show several times, and then I watched the movie, and I have deep thoughts about the quality differential and like how it all equates. So
I sense a Kate's corner coming through. I think
it was a massive Kate's corner.
Yes,
sensation. I can either hold off and do it next time, or I can go right now.
You know what? How about you give us a little taste, and then we'll also revisit it next time. Give us the preview, the promo, the news version, if you will.
All right. So I started off reading the novel.
Yep.
I'm that kind of person. I wanted to read it. I wanted to read the source material first. So I read the book. It was like a 2.5 to a 3 out of 5, 2.5 to 3 out of 5. The overall premise was good, but there was just something really holding it back. There is an intrinsic level of ick that's always just going to be there with certain aspects of the story. You can't really get around that. So that kind of took away from the experience somewhat. And there was this kind of perpetual feeling of like lack of tension or way too much tension. I think I told you that it kind of got in its own way by trying to go full extremes of wholesome and angst, and it kind of stifled its own complexity by doing that, because it raises a lot of really interesting questions if it let it experience it, but instead it just kind of forced character emotion. I did like the characters, but it was just kind of, they were pushed through the story rather than experiencing it, which is kind of commentary on the story itself, but it wasn't compelling. Then I watched the show, and the show still has plenty of issues. It's not a perfect show. The ick is still there, but the ick is used, it has a little bit more utility in it, at least. And one of the things that they really did so much better is inserting romantic tension. There was something from go, almost like 10 minutes into the first episode, they changed something that kind of snowballs into a greater effect as it goes on. And it changes how you look at his character. It changes their entire dynamic. It was actually something that I was glad she didn't respond this way when I read the book. But when I saw it and actually saw and understood the implications of it in the show, I much preferred how she responded in the show. And it raised that 2.5, 3, all the way up to a 4.5 for me, because it added so much flavor and complexity. And yet there is still something like missing, and it's sending me into like a problem-solving puzzle spiral that I have to like figure out what that piece is, and I haven't figured it out yet, which is why I'm corner Kating it over here.
So you guys heard it here first on 713. Kate is going to explain to us exactly what the time traveler's wife could do to fix itself.
Yeah. Yes. And hopefully they do get a second season, because they only told the first half of the book.
Oh.
So
I did not know that.
And yes, I didn't know that going in. It was a lovely surprise for me but it wasn't a conclusion. It was a bit of a cliffhanger or a semi-conclusion to the first half of the novel. And I really want them to finish it, because if they finish it, they could actually continue to improve what they've done and what they've changed to really elevate the story. So I would highly suggest, if you have 6 hours to kill anytime between now and then, watch the show.
I really want to. From what I've heard, from what you've said tonight, and then also from you and I kind of talking about it a bit before, I'm more inclined to watch the show than I am to read the book, but maybe I would do it in some kind of reverse order kind of thing. I'll briefly mention what I watched just because it overlapped with yours. Only Murders in the Building. And I actually, I can't even remember the last time I did this. For Only Murders in the Building season 2, I watched the season 2 episode 1 back to back on repeat so that I had watched the whole thing through twice. I could not have said that in a more awkward way. I watched the first episode twice in a row. I can't even remember the last time I did that. This is going to be a great season. I'm very excited about it. I also watched episode 2. Great. I also caught up on Handmaid's Tale about a week and a half ago. Very appropriate to, current political climate. So that was a great season, as opposed to the current political climate, which is not a great season. And that's about all I've done. Carey, I'm gonna toss it to you. It is your turn. What did you watch this week?
I finished watching Kenobi just last week. I am episode behind on Ms. Marvel, but I'll probably catch that tomorrow, which is an absolutely fun, dynamic, exhilarating, brilliant looking show. Everyone should watch it. I have not made up my mind yet if I'm going to rewatch Arrow season 5 because I know where it leads. Arrow season 6, and I don't know if I want to do that. And of course, I saw the preview for Stargirl.
Yes.
Superman and Lois. All it said was coming soon. I can't remember exactly when it's supposed to start. I think it's a fall start. But I'm looking forward to that. So,
I'm very much looking forward to Stargirl. A fun fact I found out about Miss Marvel, which I still haven't watched yet, but I want to watch soon. And I'm sure everybody knew this except me. But apparently it was filmed here in Atlanta.
Are you telling me or asking?
What now?
Are you telling me or asking me?
I am telling, and I know this because I'm trying not to be spoilery because you haven't watched the finale, but there is a notable scene that I believe would naturally occur in a finale that was filmed in a hotel. And I was looking at these pictures that one of the actors had posted in said hotel, and there is carpet behind him that is very recognizable carpet because I and also Kate have spent many hours in said hotel ballroom, and so I know where it was filmed, and it was filmed here in Atlanta.
I did not know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the new series, the new Marvel shows, they filmed a ton of that stuff in Atlanta. A lot of WandaVision was filmed in Atlanta. Some of Loki was filmed in Atlanta. A lot of the warehouse scene is really close to where I know exactly where the warehouse scene in Hawkeye was filmed. I know a lot of Miss Marvel was filmed here. So
Loki.
I think, yeah, a lot of it has been filmed here.
Yeah.
So, Corey, is Atlanta sort of like, I know they do a lot of film in Atlanta, but is it sort of a situation where it's like, hey, they're filming something, we know it's happening, no big deal? Or is it still a big deal?
I would say kind of no big deal. Most of the time when there's stuff filming here in Atlanta, there's not like diehard fans around. Like most of the time when I'm seeing and I could be wrong. It could be different at different parts, especially if you go into like more of the areas that are more like outside of the city that have like, the big trees and the stuff that looks like where like Hunger Games and Walking Dead and stuff was filmed. You might get a little bit more interest, but most of the stuff that's here in the city, you kind of get, I don't know, maybe a little bit of the New York vibe where like everybody's too cool to pay attention and they act like they've never seen it.
And I mean, even the more rural stuff that's filmed in Georgia, I would say they kind of get almost like the annoyed response.
Yeah.
They filmed Ozark, and you could drive by where they would film Ozark, and it actually like causes massive like traffic jam all the time on the bridge, and most people's response would just simply be that they just were not happy.
Yeah.
So the Ozark show was filmed in somewhat rural Georgia, and it had a very culturally negative response.
Yeah, it kind of varies. I think like if it causes traffic, then suddenly everybody's against it. If it doesn't cause traffic, everybody's neutral. And then like every once in a while, you'll get that perfect mix of like it's a show, and then you also have somebody there who like cares about it and has seen it. But I don't know. I think most people here act like they're too cool to have seen it. Well, we are at time, but let me tell you, I've got a lot more thoughts on Only Murders in the Building to touch on. So we are going to dive into that in 2 weeks, where we'll have quite a few more episodes of Only Murders in the Building to talk about. And we will also have Stranger Things to talk about, if any of you guys have watched that, several other things, and also, absolutely nobody cares, but the Bachelor premiere to talk about, Bachelorette, way more important, to talk about the narrator. Nobody wanted to talk about that. But in 2 weeks, we'll have a lot. So 7/13, July 13th, I will see you here. Until then, have a good kind of holiday upcoming, if you celebrate, and if you don't, that's kind of cool too. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye. I almost knocked over my water. Okay, let me figure out how to turn this off.